The December wind cut through Delia Sawyer's threadbare coat like 1,000 tiny knives as she stood alone on the wooden platform of the Placitas station, watching the last passenger train pull away into the growing darkness of the New Mexico evening. Snow had begun to fall an hour earlier, unusual for this part of the territory even in winter, and now the flakes came down thick and fast, swirling in eddies that seemed determined to freeze her where she stood. She clutched her small carpet bag tighter, knowing it contained everything she owned in this world, which amounted to 2 dresses, a brush, and $3 she had hidden in the lining. The station master had locked up and gone home without so much as a glance in her direction, and she knew why. She had arrived 3 days ago with promises of employment at the Mitchell Ranch, only to discover that Mrs. Mitchell had taken one look at her scarred face and withered left hand, remnants of a childhood fire that had claimed her parents and nearly taken her life, and declared her unsuitable for any position in the household. Delia had spent the last of her traveling money on a room at the boarding house, thinking she could find work elsewhere in town, but Placitas was small and word traveled fast. By the second day, every door had closed before she could even finish explaining her skills. She could cook, clean, keep accounts and read better than most, but none of that mattered when people could not see past the puckered skin that ran from her left cheekbone down her neck, or the way her left hand curved inward, the fingers functional but twisted. She had learned long ago that most folks saw her disfigurement first and her humanity never, and this dusty New Mexico town was proving no different from all the others she had tried. The wind picked up, and Delia's teeth began to chatter. She looked around the empty station platform, searching for any shelter, but the small waiting room was locked tight. The nearest building was a saloon about 200 yards down the main street, its windows glowing warm with lamplight, but she knew better than to go there. A woman alone in a saloon would face questions and assumptions she had no energy to counter. Behind the station, she could see the dark shapes of storage sheds and what looked like a small stable. Perhaps she could shelter there until morning, though the thought of spending the night in a freezing barn made her want to weep. She was about to pick up her bag and make her way toward the sheds when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching through the snow. A moment later, a rider emerged from the white curtain of snowfall, sitting tall on a sturdy roan horse. Even in the dim light from the station's single lamp, she could see he was a working man, dressed in worn leather chaps, a thick coat, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the weather. He rode right up to the platform and stopped, his horse's breath coming out in great clouds of steam. "Station closed," he called out, his voice deep and carrying easily over the wind. "Yes, sir," Delia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Closed an hour ago." The man dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent his life on horseback. He was tall, she saw now, with broad shoulders and the lean build of a cowboy who worked hard for his living. He tied his horse to the hitching post and stepped up onto the platform, and it was only then that the lamplight fell full on his face. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with strong features tanned dark from sun and wind, and eyes that were a startling light brown, almost amber. A few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and dark hair curled from beneath his hat. "Waiting for someone?" he asked, and then his eyes took in her thin coat, her shivering form, and the small bag at her feet. His expression shifted, became more focused. "You waiting for a train? Next one does not come until day after tomorrow," Delia said, and hated how small her voice sounded. She turned her face slightly, an old habit, trying to keep the scarred side in shadow. The cowboy was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Most people looked away quickly when they saw her face, some with pity, others with barely concealed disgust. But this man kept looking, and she could not read what was in his eyes. "You planning to stand out here in this storm for 2 days?" he asked finally. "I will find somewhere," Delia said, lifting her chin. She had her pride, even if she had little else. "Boarding house is full up," the man said, and it was not a question. "I heard them say so at the general store this afternoon. Railroad crew came through and took all the rooms." Delia's heart sank. She had not known that. She had been planning to throw herself on the boarding house keeper's mercy, perhaps offer to work for a bed. "I see," she managed. "You got people here. Anyone expecting you?" "No." The word came out flat. There was no point in lying. The cowboy pushed his hat back slightly, and snowflakes immediately began to collect in his dark hair. "This is a bad storm. Temperature is going to drop hard tonight. You cannot stay out here." "I will manage," Delia said, though she had no idea how. Her feet were already numb in her worn boots, and her fingers ached with cold even inside her thin gloves. "No, you will not," the man said, and there was no judgment in his voice, just statement of fact. "You will freeze to death, and come morning someone will find you here stiff as a board." He paused, seeming to consider something, then said, "I've got a place about 3 miles out. Small ranch, just me and my horses. You can shelter there until the storm passes and the boarding house has room." Delia stared at him. "I do not know you." "Name is Rowan Pierce," he said, and touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that was oddly formal given the circumstances. "I work horses, breaking and training mostly. Been in Placitas about 4 years. You can ask anyone in town about me, though I suppose that does not help you right now." "Why would you help me?" The question came out sharper than she intended, edged with all the suspicion she had learned to carry. Rowan Pierce looked at her steadily, and for the first time his gaze moved deliberately to the scarred side of her face, then to her twisted hand, and then back to her eyes. "Because you are freezing and you need help. That is reason enough. People do not usually see it that way." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of what might have been anger, but not at her. "Then people are damned fools," he said bluntly. "I see a woman who is cold and alone and in trouble. I see someone who needs help. That is what I see." The simple declaration struck something deep in Delia's chest, something that had been frozen far longer than just this winter evening. She wanted to argue, wanted to protect herself with the walls she had built so carefully over the years, but the cold was seeping into her bones, and her body was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Pride was a luxury she could not afford tonight. "I have a little money," she said. "I can pay for my keep." "Keep your money," Rowan said. He picked up her carpetbag before she could protest. "Come on. We need to get moving before this gets any worse." He led her to his horse, a sturdy animal with a patient eye, and swung into the saddle with easy strength. Then he reached down, his hand extended. "Put your foot on mine and I will pull you up." Delia hesitated only a moment before placing her boot on his and grasping his hand. His grip was warm and solid, and he lifted her up behind him as though she weighed nothing. She settled onto the horse's broad back, uncertain where to put her hands. "Hold on around my waist," Rowan said, his voice matter of fact. "It is going to be slippery going." Tentatively, Delia put her arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of his body through his coat. When was the last time she had been this close to another person? She could not remember. Rowan clicked his tongue and the horse started forward, moving carefully through the deepening snow. They left the lights of Placitas behind, heading out into the darkness. The snow was falling so thick now that Delia could barely see 10 feet ahead, but the horse seemed to know the way, and Rowan sat easy in the saddle. unbothered by the storm. Delia pressed closer to his back, grateful for his warmth, though she told herself it was only practical. The wind howled around them, and she closed her eyes, trusting this stranger because she had no other choice. Time seemed to stretch and blur in the cold and darkness. Delia's face went numb, and she could no longer feel her feet at all. She focused on holding on the rhythm of the horse's gait, on staying conscious. Just when she thought she could not bear another minute, she saw a light ahead, dim at first but growing stronger. "Almost there," Rowan called back to her. The light resolved into the glow from windows, and then she could make out the shape of a house, small but solid-looking, with a barn and a couple of outbuildings nearby. Rowan rode straight to the barn, dismounted, and helped her down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and he caught her elbow, steadying her. "Can you stand?" "Yes," she managed, though she was not entirely sure it was true. "Go on to the house. Door is unlocked. Get yourself by the stove, and I will be in as soon as I have seen to the horse." Delia did not argue. She stumbled through the snow to the house, pushed open the door, and nearly wept with relief at the warmth that greeted her. A wood stove in the corner radiated heat, and although the house was simple, just one main room with a sleeping area curtained off at one end and a rough kitchen along one wall, it was clean and blessedly warm. She moved toward the stove on shaking legs, holding her hands out to the heat. She was still standing there, trying to stop shivering when Rowan came in, carrying her carpet bag. Snow covered his hat and shoulders, and his face was red from the cold. He shook the snow off and hung his hat and coat on pegs by the door, then added several logs to the stove. "Coffee," he said, moving to the kitchen area, "and food." "When did you last eat?" "This morning," Delia admitted. "A little bread." His mouth tightened, but he did not comment. He moved around the small kitchen with practiced efficiency, building up the fire in the cooking stove, filling a battered coffee pot with water and grounds, slicing thick pieces from a loaf of bread, and laying strips of bacon in a pan. The smells that soon filled the cabin made Delia's mouth water and her stomach cramp with hunger. "Sit down," Rowan said, nodding toward a rough wooden table with two chairs. "You look like you are about to fall over." Delia sat, grateful to be off her feet. She watched him cook, this stranger who had brought her into his home without asking for anything in return. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of a man used to taking care of himself, comfortable in his space. When the bacon was crispy and the bread toasted, he loaded 2 plates and brought them to the table, then went back for the coffee. "Eat," he said, sitting down across from her. Delia did not need to be told twice. She ate with a hunger that she could not disguise, and if Rowan noticed, he had the grace not to comment. The food was simple but good, the bacon salty and perfect, the bread fresh enough to be only a day or two old. The coffee was strong and hot, and she wrapped both hands around the tin cup, savoring the warmth. When she had finished, she sat back and found Rowan watching her with those unusual amber eyes. In the lamplight, she could see him more clearly. He had a scar through his left eyebrow, and his nose had been broken at least once, giving his face a rugged cast that was somehow fitting. His hands, wrapped around his own coffee cup, were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who worked with horses and ropes and leather. "Thank you," Delia said quietly, "for the meal, for all of this." "You are welcome," Rowan replied. "What is your name, Delia?" "Delia Sawyer." "Where were you headed, Delia Sawyer, before the world went sideways on you?" She had not expected the question, or the gentle way he asked it. "Nowhere now. I came here for a position at the Mitchell Ranch, but Mrs. Mitchell took one look at me and said no. I have been trying to find other work, but no one wants to hire me." "Because of your face and your hand," Rowan said, and again there was no pity in his voice, just acknowledgement of fact. Yes. Delia lifted her chin, daring him to look away. He did not. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, regarding her steadily. That is the damnedest thing I have ever heard. What does your face have to do with whether you can work? Everything, apparently, Delia said, and could not keep the bitterness from her voice. People think I will frighten their children, or that I am cursed, or simply that I am too unpleasant to look at day after day. People are idiots, Rowan said flatly. He drank his coffee, set the cup down with a decisive thunk. Can you really cook and clean and keep accounts like you said at the station? Yes. My aunt raised me after my parents died, and she was a housekeeper for a wealthy family in Kansas City. She taught me everything. I can cook plain or fancy, I can clean anything, I can sew and mend, and I can read and write and do figures. Why did you leave Kansas City? My aunt died last year. The family she worked for let me stay on for a few months, but then they moved east and did not want to take me with them. I have been looking for work ever since, going wherever I hear there might be a position. She wrapped her damaged hand around the coffee cup, unconsciously hiding it. It has not gone well. Rowan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as though he was thinking through something complicated. Finally, he said, I need someone. Delia's heart jumped. What? I need help, Rowan said, leaning forward now, his eyes intent on hers. This place, it is just me, and I have got more work than I can handle. I am training horses for 3 different ranches right now, and I have got 2 Mustangs I took on that are going to require dedicated time. I am living on cold beans and stale bread half the time because I do not have time to cook proper meals. The place is a mess because I am in the barn from dawn to dusk. And I have been thinking I need to get someone to help with the books because I am terrible at keeping track of what is owed to me and what I have paid out. He paused. I could use someone like you. Delia stared at him. You do not even know me. I know you need work and I need help. Seems like a fair trade. You would trust me here alone while you work. You would trust me with your accounts. Would you steal from me? No, then I would trust you. He said it simply, as though it was the easiest decision in the world. Mr. Pierce, Rowan. Rowan, she corrected, her voice shaking slightly. You are offering me this because you feel sorry for me. His eyes flashed, and for the first time she saw real anger in them, though it was not directed at her. I am offering you this because I need help and you need work. I am offering you this because you have skills I can use. I am offering you this because you are clearly a hard worker who has been dealt a rough hand by life, and I admire people who keep going despite that. He leaned forward even more, his gaze intense. I am offering you this because when I look at you, I do not see what everyone else apparently sees. I see a woman who is strong enough to travel alone looking for work, smart enough to have learned valuable skills, and brave enough to keep trying even when every door slams in her face. I see someone of worth, Delia Sawyer. I see someone worth helping, and if other people cannot see that, then they are blind fools and I do not give a damn what they think. The words hit her like a physical force, and to her horror, Delia felt tears spring to her eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever looked at her and seen past the scars to the person beneath. She blinked hard, trying to force the tears back. I see your worth when others see nothing, Rowan said quietly, and the simple statement broke something open inside her. A sob escaped before she could stop it, and then she was crying in earnest, covering her face with her hands, mortified and unable to stop. She heard Rowan's chair scrape back, and then he was there, kneeling beside her, not touching her but close, his presence solid and somehow comforting. It is all right, he said gently. Let it out. God knows you have probably been holding it in long enough. She cried until she had no more tears, until she was empty and exhausted and strangely lighter. When she finally lowered her hands, Rowan handed her a clean handkerchief, and she took it gratefully, wiping her eyes and face. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Do not be. You have nothing to be sorry for." He stood, moving back to give her space. "There is a room off the back," he said, nodding toward a door she had not noticed before. "Used to be a storage room, but I cleared it out last year thinking I might need it someday. There is a bed in there and a small stove. It is not much, but it is private and it is warm. You can sleep there tonight, and in the morning, if you want the job, we can talk about terms." "What kind of terms?" "Room and board plus wages. I cannot pay a lot, but I can pay fair. We can work out the details tomorrow." He picked up her carpet bag. "Come on, I will show you." The small room was exactly as he had described, plain but clean, with a narrow bed covered in quilts, a small stove already laid with wood and ready to light, and a washstand with a basin and pitcher. It was the most private space Delia had been able to call her own in months. "I will let you get settled," Rowan said, setting her bag on the bed. "There is more wood in the box there if you need it, and water in the pitcher. Privy is out back, but I would wait until morning if I were you. This storm is not fit for travel, even 20 feet. He paused at the door. "I am glad you are here, Delia. I mean that. I think this is going to work out well for both of us." Then he was gone, closing the door quietly behind him, and Delia was alone. She stood in the middle of the small room, looking around at the simple furnishings, feeling the warmth from the stove in the main room seeping through the walls. Slowly, carefully, she unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses on the pegs provided, setting out her brush. Then she washed her face and hands in the cold water from the pitcher, changed into her nightgown, and climbed into the bed. The quilts were heavy and warm, and the pillows smelled faintly of lavender. Delia lay in the darkness, listening to the storm howl outside and the quiet sounds of Rowan moving around in the main room. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. Not just physically safe from the storm, but safe in a deeper way, as though she had stumbled into a place where she might be allowed to be herself, scars and all. She thought about what Rowan had said. "I see your worth when others see nothing." The words echoed in her mind, and she wrapped them around herself like a blanket, holding them close. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own uncertainties, but tonight she had warmth and food and shelter, and the fragile beginning of hope. Sleep came easier than it had in months. Delia woke to pale gray light filtering through the small window and the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was, and then memory flooded back. The storm, the station, Rowan Pierce. She sat up, pushing her braid over her shoulder, and realized the small stove in her room was radiating heat. Rowan must have come in while she slept to light it. The thoughtfulness of that gesture made her throat tight. She dressed quickly in her better dress, a dark blue wool that was worn but clean, and did what she could with her hair, braiding it and pinning it up. Her face in the small mirror over the washstand looked back at her, pale and tired, the scars standing out livid against her skin. She had long ago stopped trying to hide them completely, but old habits died hard, and she found herself arranging her hair to fall forward slightly on the left side. When she emerged into the main room, she found Rowan at the stove, cooking breakfast. He had already been outside, she could tell, because his hair was damp and he smelled like cold air and horses. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder with a smile. "Storm finally broke about an hour ago, left us with about 8 inches of snow." "Good morning," Delia replied. She looked around, suddenly uncertain what to do with herself. "Coffee is ready if you want some. Breakfast will be done in a minute." He flipped the bacon expertly. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time. Thank you for lighting the stove in my room. Figured you could use the warmth." He loaded 2 plates with bacon, eggs, and fried potatoes and brought them to the table. "Sit. Eat. Then we can talk business." They ate in comfortable silence, and Delia found herself watching Rowan when she thought he was not looking. In the morning light, she could see more details. The laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, the strong column of his throat, the capable way his hands moved. He was handsome, she realized, though it was a rough, weathered handsomeness that came from hard work and honest living. When he caught her looking, she quickly dropped her eyes to her plate, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. After breakfast, Rowan poured them both more coffee and sat back in his chair. "So, the job. If you want it, here is what I am thinking. You would handle the cooking and cleaning, which would be a godsend because I am terrible at both. You would also help me with the accounts, keeping track of money in and money out, making sure I am not getting cheated and that I am paying my bills on time. In exchange, you get room and board, that room you slept in last night, and $20 a month." $20 a month was more than fair for room and board included. It was generous, actually. "That is very good pay," Delia said carefully. "It is fair pay for the work I am asking. I am gone most days from dawn until after dark, working in the barn or out in the pastures with the horses. I would need you here managing the house, and I would need to be able to trust that you are doing it right. That kind of trust is worth good pay." He paused. "There is one more thing. People in town are going to talk. A single woman living with a single man, there will be gossip." Delia's stomach sank. She had not thought of that. "I see." "I do not give a damn what people say," Rowan continued firmly, "but I want you to know what you might be walking into. Some folks might not be kind about it." "They are already not kind to me," Delia said quietly. "At least here I would have work and a place to stay." "All right then." Rowan stood and offered his hand across the table. "Do we have a deal?" Delia looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. He was looking at her with that same steady, honest gaze that seemed to see right through all her defenses. She thought about the alternative, going back to Placida's, trying again to find work, facing rejection after rejection until her money ran out and she had nothing left. Then she thought about this warm house, the peaceful quiet of the ranch, the way Rowan had looked at her last night and said he saw her worth. She reached out and shook his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "We have a deal." The smile that broke across Rowan's face was like the sun coming out. "Good. That is real good. Now let me show you around properly, and then I have got to get out to the barn. I have got a 3-year-old mare that needs working, and she is a handful." He gave her a tour of the house, showing her where everything was kept, the pantry with its supplies, the root cellar built into the floor with a trapdoor in the kitchen area, the small loft above the main room where he kept extra blankets and his own private things. Then he took her outside, and Delia caught her breath at the beauty of it. The snow had transformed the landscape into something magical, white and pristine under a sky that was clearing to brilliant blue. The barn was larger than the house, a solid structure with a hayloft and what looked like 6 or 8 stalls. Beyond it were several corrals, and beyond those, pastures bordered by rail fences, all blanketed in snow. "I've got 6 horses here right now," Rowan explained as they walked toward the barn. "The mare I am working with, 2 geldings that I am training for ranch work, and 3 mustangs that I am gentling. The mustangs are out in the far pasture because they are still half wild, and I do not want them spooking the others." Inside the barn, Delia was struck by how clean and organized everything was. The stalls were mucked out, fresh straw laid down, and all the tack hung neatly on the walls. 3 horses looked out curiously from their stalls, beautiful animals with intelligent eyes. "This is Juniper," Rowan said, stopping at the stall of a pretty chestnut mare with a white blaze. "She is the one who needs the most work. Smart as a whip but stubborn. Reminds me of someone." He cut a glance at Delia with a hint of humor in his eyes. Despite herself, Delia smiled. "Are you saying I am stubborn? Are you saying you are not?" He grinned at her, and it transformed his face, made him look younger and more carefree. "Come on, I will introduce you to the others." He showed her the 2 geldings, a steady bay named Copper and a flashy paint named Domino, both of whom seemed calm and well-mannered. Then he took her out to the far pasture, where 3 smaller horses, rougher coated and wirier than the others, watched their approach with wary eyes. "Mustangs," Rowan said, his voice going quieter, gentler. "Caught them myself about 2 months ago. That buckskin stallion there, I am calling him Flint because he is hard as stone and twice as sharp. The 2 mares are sisters, I think. Still working on names for them." "They are beautiful," Delia said, watching the way the horses moved, nervous but not panicked, clearly used to Rowan's presence if not entirely comfortable with it yet. "They are survivors," Rowan said. "Born wild, learned to live on nothing but scrub grass and willpower. Someone wants to break them to saddle, but I am taking it slow. They deserve respect, not a hard hand and a whip." He looked at Delia, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Everything that has survived deserves respect. Deserves to be seen for what it is, not what others think it should be. He was not just talking about the horses, Delia realized. He was talking about her. About himself, maybe. About anyone who had been dealt a hard hand and kept going anyway. "I should let you get to work," she said, her voice coming out softer than she intended. "And I should let you get the house in order. If you need anything, just holler. I will be in the barn or the near corral." He touched his hat brim, that oddly formal gesture again, and walked toward the barn, moving with that easy cowboy grace. Delia watched him go, then turned back toward the house. She had work to do. She spent the morning exploring the house more thoroughly, taking stock of supplies and planning meals. The pantry was reasonably well stocked with basics: flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, sugar, and there were potatoes and onions and carrots in the root cellar. She could work with this. She made a list of things that were running low, then set about cleaning the house properly. Rowan had kept it neat enough, but it needed a woman's touch, she thought. She swept and scrubbed, washed the windows, beat the dust from the rag rugs. She found linens in the loft and changed the bedding, hanging the old sheets outside to air despite the cold. By the time she started preparing the midday meal, she was tired but satisfied. The house looked and felt different already, more like a home than just a place where a man slept between long days of work. She made a hearty stew with salt pork and vegetables, letting it simmer on the stove while she baked bread. The smell of baking bread filled the house, warm and yeasty and comforting. When Rowan came in at midday, stamping snow from his boots, he stopped in the doorway and just looked around. "Did you do all this in one morning?" "It needed doing," Delia said, ladling stew into bowls. "It looks like a different place." He hung up his coat and hat, then came to the table, shaking his head in wonder. "Smells like one too. Is that fresh bread? It will be ready in about 10 minutes. They ate together, and Rowan praised the stew so enthusiastically that Delia found herself blushing with pleasure. It had been a long time since anyone had appreciated her cooking, her work, her presence. After the meal, Rowan showed her his account book, a battered ledger with entries that were sometimes clear and sometimes nearly illegible. She spent the afternoon going through it, organizing the information, making sense of his finances. It was worse than he had suggested. He was owed money by 2 different ranches, and he had let it go for months because he had not kept track properly. When she showed him that evening, he whistled low. "I am an idiot with numbers." "You are a horseman, not an accountant," Delia said. "But you need to collect what you are owed. That is over $60 right there. I will ride out tomorrow and have words with them." He looked at her with something like admiration. "You sorted all that out in one afternoon. It is not difficult if you organize it properly." "It is to me." He closed the ledger, his hand resting on the worn cover. "This is going to work out real well, Delia. I can feel it." That night, after another good meal and pleasant conversation by the fire, Delia retired to her small room feeling something she had not felt in a very long time: contentment. The work was satisfying, the house was comfortable, and Rowan was easy company, respectful and kind. She could be happy here, she thought. For however long it lasted, she could be happy. The days fell into a rhythm. Rowan rose before dawn and went out to work with the horses, coming in for breakfast that Delia prepared, then heading back out until midday dinner. He would work through the afternoon, coming in again at dusk for supper and a couple of hours by the fire before bed. Delia managed the house, cooked the meals, and slowly brought order to Rowan's accounts and the general running of the ranch. She discovered she had a talent for organization, and she enjoyed the work, the sense of making something better, more efficient. But more than the work, she found herself looking forward to the evenings. Rowan was an easy talker when the work was done and he could relax. He told her stories about the horses he had trained, about growing up in Texas, about the years he had spent riding as a ranch hand before saving enough to buy this piece of land and start his own business. He asked her questions too, gentle inquiries about her life, and slowly, carefully, she began to tell him things she had never told anyone. About her parents, who she barely remembered but knew had loved her. About the fire that had scarred her, how she remembered the heat and the fear but little else. About her aunt, stern but kind, who had taught her everything and told her that she was worth just as much as anyone else, scars or no scars. "Your aunt sounds like she was a wise woman," Rowan said one evening about a week into Delia's stay. "She was. I miss her terribly." "I am sorry you lost her." He was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "I lost my ma when I was 15. Fever took her in the winter. My pa followed her 2 years later. I think he died of a broken heart more than anything else. That must have been hard." "It was. But it taught me that time is precious and people are precious. When you find someone good, you hold on to them. You do not let stupid things like pride or fear or what other people think get in the way." Delia looked at him, this man who had taken her in when she was freezing and desperate, who had looked at her scars and seen past them to the person beneath. "Is that what you did with me?" she asked quietly. "Held on to someone good." Rowan turned his head, met her eyes across the space between their chairs. The firelight played across his face, highlighting the strong bones, the scarred eyebrow, the amber eyes that seemed to see into her soul. "Yes," he said simply. "That is exactly what I did." Something shifted in that moment, something subtle but profound. The air between them felt charged, full of possibility. Delia's heart was beating faster and she could not look away from him. For the first time in her life, she saw something in a man's eyes that she had never expected to see when someone looked at her: desire. Not pity, not curiosity about her scars, but genuine attraction, warm and honest and unmistakable. "Rowan," she whispered, not even sure what she was going to say. He stood, crossed the space between them, and knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his, both of them, even the twisted one, holding them gently but firmly. "Delia, I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not scare you off." "What is it?" "I did not bring you here just because I needed help around the house." I mean, I did need help, that is true enough. But from the moment I saw you on that station platform, freezing and alone and so damned brave, trying to hold your head up even though the world had beaten you down, I felt something. Something I have not felt before. He took a breath, his eyes never leaving hers. I think you are the strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever met, and I would very much like the chance to court you properly if you would be willing. Beautiful. He had called her beautiful. Delia felt tears prick her eyes. Rowan, I am scarred, I am damaged. There are so many women who would be a better choice for you. I do not want anyone else. His voice was fierce now, intense. I want you. I see you, Delia, all of you, and what I see is someone amazing, someone worth everything. Please give me a chance, give us a chance. Delia thought about all the years she had spent believing no one would ever want her, that she would spend her life alone, an object of pity at best and disgust at worst. She thought about how Rowan had looked at her from the very beginning, with respect and kindness, and now she could see, with love beginning to bloom. She thought about how she felt when she was with him, safe and seen and valued. Yes, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Yes, I would like that very much. The smile that broke across Rowan's face was brilliant. He raised her hands to his lips and kissed them, first one and then the other, even the scarred, twisted one, pressing his lips to the damaged skin as though it was precious. You have made me very happy, he said. You have made me happy too, Delia replied, and realized it was absolutely true. She was happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Rowan stood but did not let go of her hands, drawing her to her feet so they stood facing each other. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his palms warm against her cheeks. He traced his thumb gently along the worst of the scars on her left cheek, and there was nothing but tenderness in his touch. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. In answer, Delia rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning the feel of each other. Then Rowan's arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened, became something more. Delia wrapped her arms around his neck, losing herself in the sensation, in the warmth and strength of him, in the dizzying realization that someone wanted her like this, fully and completely, scars and all. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. I have been wanting to do that since the day you got here. I wish you had done it sooner, Delia said, and was rewarded by his laugh, deep and genuine. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, and Delia felt something settle deep in her chest, something that felt like coming home. Over the following weeks, everything changed and yet stayed the same. They still fell into the same rhythm of work, Rowan with his horses and Delia with the house and accounts. But now there were stolen kisses in the kitchen, lingering looks across the dinner table, evenings spent sitting close by the fire, his arm around her shoulders and her head resting against his chest. Rowan courted her properly, as he had promised, treating her with respect even as the attraction between them grew stronger each day. He brought her small gifts, a ribbon from town that matched her blue dress, wildflowers that he had somehow found blooming in a sheltered spot despite the winter cold, a book he had bought because he thought she would enjoy it. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Rowan told her about his dream of building the ranch into something bigger, a place known throughout the territory for quality horses. Delia confessed her secret wish to someday have a family, children of her own to love and raise, though she had long ago given up hope of that. "Why would you give up hope?" Rowan asked one evening. "Because I thought no one would ever want to marry me," Delia said quietly. No one would want to have children with someone who looks like I do. Rowan pulled back so he could look at her face, his expression serious. Delia, you have got to stop thinking that way. You are not defined by your scars. They are part of you, yes, but they are not all of you. And anyone who cannot see past them to the incredible woman you are does not deserve you. He paused, then said slowly, I want to marry you, Delia. I want to build a life with you. I want to have children with you. I want all of it, everything, for as long as we both live. Delia's breath caught in her throat. Rowan, I am not asking yet, he said quickly. I know it is too soon and you need time, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I am courting you because I intend to marry you if you will have me. I would be honored, Delia whispered and saw joy light up his face. But not yet, he said. When I ask you properly, it will be special. You deserve special, Delia. True to his word, Rowan waited until the spring. The snow melted gradually through February and into March, and the world turned green and alive. The wildflowers bloomed in abundance, painting the pastures in brilliant colors. Rowan worked long hours with the horses, and Delia watched him with pride as he successfully trained the chestnut mare Juniper to saddle and sold her to a rancher for a good price. The Mustangs, too, were making progress. Flint, the buckskin stallion, had begun to accept a halter and lead, and the two mares were growing more comfortable with human presence. On a warm day in late April, Rowan came in from the barn in the middle of the afternoon, which was unusual. Delia looked up from the account she was working on, surprised. Is everything all right? Everything is perfect, Rowan said. He was smiling, that brilliant smile that always made her heart skip. I need you to come with me, right now. Where are we going? It is a surprise. Trust me. Always, Delia said, and meant it. He took her hand and led her outside, but instead of toward the barn, he headed toward the pastures. They walked through the spring grass, bright green and dotted with yellow and purple flowers, until they came to a spot on a small rise where they could see for miles in every direction. The view was breathtaking, the land rolling away in gentle waves, the sky huge and blue overhead. This is my favorite place on the whole ranch, Rowan said. I come here when I need to think, or when I just need to remember how lucky I am to have this land, this life. It is beautiful, Delia said, not as beautiful as you. Rowan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Delia Sawyer, I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing on that station platform, too stubborn to give up even when you were freezing and alone. I have loved you more with every day that passes, with every smile you give me, every meal we share, every evening we spend together. You make my house a home. You make my life better just by being in it. I cannot imagine a future without you in it, and I do not want to. He let go of her hands and knelt in the grass, pulling something from his pocket. It was a ring, simple but lovely, a gold band with a small blue stone. This was my mother's. It is the only thing I have from her, and I want you to have it. Delia, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my family for the rest of our lives? Tears were streaming down Delia's face, but she was smiling, smiling so wide it almost hurt. Yes, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Rowan, I will marry you. I love you so much. Rowan surged to his feet, slipping the ring onto her finger, then pulling her into his arms and kissing her with all the passion and tenderness he possessed. Delia kissed him back just as fiercely, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into it. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, Rowan picked her up and spun her around, whooping with happiness. You just made me the happiest man in New Mexico, he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. And you have made me the happiest woman, Delia replied. She looked down at the ring on her finger, the blue stone catching the sunlight. Your mother's ring, I will treasure it always. She would have loved you, Rowan said softly. She always said the measure of a person was not what they looked like but what they did with the life they were given. You have taken everything life threw at you and kept going, kept being kind and strong and good. She would have been proud to call you her daughter. They were married a month later in the small church in Placitas, with half the town in attendance. Word had spread about Rowan Pierce's engagement to his housekeeper, and there had been some talk, as he had predicted, but Rowan did not care and neither did Delia. A few people came to the wedding out of genuine good wishes, others out of curiosity, but Delia barely noticed. She only had eyes for Rowan, standing tall and handsome in a new suit, looking at her as though she was the most precious thing in the world. She wore a new dress, too, pale yellow calico that she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She had agonized over whether to try to hide her scars for the wedding, but in the end, she wore her hair simply pinned up, the scars fully visible. She was done hiding. Rowan loved her as she was, and that was all that mattered. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When the preacher asked Rowan if he took Delia to be his wife, he said, "I do," in a voice that rang out strong and clear, leaving no doubt. When it was Delia's turn, she looked into Rowan's amber eyes and said, "I do," with all the love in her heart. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said, and Rowan did thoroughly, to the point where someone in the back of the church laughed, and someone else called out, "Save some for the honeymoon." But Delia did not care. She was married to the man she loved, the man who had seen her worth when others saw nothing, and nothing else mattered. They held a small reception at the ranch, with food that Delia and several of the church ladies had prepared, and music from a fiddle player who lived in town. They danced together in the yard, Rowan holding her close and whispering in her ear all the things he was going to do to make her happy for the rest of their lives. As the sun set and the guests finally left, Rowan carried Delia over the threshold of their home, both of them laughing. That night, in the privacy of what was now their bedroom, Delia had moved her things into Rowan's room the week before the wedding. They came together as husband and wife. Rowan was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and loved. When he kissed the scars on her face, on her neck, on her hand, he did it with such tenderness that Delia cried, overwhelmed by the depth of his love for her. And when they finally joined together, it felt like the most natural, right thing in the world, two people becoming one in body and heart and soul. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Delia's head on Rowan's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Delia Pierce," Rowan murmured into her hair. "I love you too, Rowan Pierce," Delia replied, "more than I ever thought possible." "We are going to have a good life together," Rowan said. "I promise you that." "We already do," Delia said, and knew it was true. The years that followed proved Rowan right. They built a life together that was full of love, hard work, and quiet joy. The horse ranch prospered under their joint management. Rowan's skill with horses became known throughout the territory, and he was never short of work. Delia managed the business side with efficiency and care, keeping the accounts in order, managing the money, and negotiating prices with the ranchers who came to buy Rowan's trained horses. Together, they made a formidable team. But more than the business success, their marriage itself was their greatest achievement. They learned each other deeply, the way married people do when they pay attention and care for each other well. Rowan learned that Delia liked her coffee with extra sugar in the morning, that she hummed while she cooked, that she had nightmares sometimes about the fire and needed to be held until she felt safe again. Delia learned that Rowan talked to his horses as though they were people, that he had a surprisingly beautiful singing voice that he only used when he thought no one was listening, that he worried constantly about doing right by her and making sure she was happy. They talked about everything, disagreed sometimes but always worked it out, supported each other through hard times and celebrated the good times together. When a late spring frost killed half their garden, they replanted together. When Rowan broke his arm falling from a particularly stubborn horse, Delia nursed him back to health with patience and humor. When a wealthy rancher from Santa Fe tried to cheat them on a sale, they confronted him together and got the fair price they deserved. And through it all, their love only deepened. Rowan never stopped looking at Delia as though she was the most beautiful woman in the world. He never stopped telling her he loved her, never stopped finding little ways to show her she was precious to him. Delia, for her part, bloomed under his love like a flower that had finally found good soil and sunshine. She grew more confident, more comfortable in her own skin. The scars were still there, would always be there, but they no longer defined her. She was Delia Pierce, successful ranch wife, skilled businesswoman, beloved partner. The scars were just part of her story, not the whole story. 2 years into their marriage, Delia realized she was pregnant. She waited a few days to be sure, then told Rowan one evening after supper. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses, picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests to be careful, then set her down gently and knelt before her, pressing his face to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I am your pa, and I already love you more than you can imagine. You have got the best ma in the world, and we are going to take such good care of you." Delia ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with emotion. "You are going to be such a good father." "I am going to try," Rowan said, looking up at her with eyes that were suspiciously bright. "God, Delia, we are going to have a baby, our baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Delia was sick for the first few months, and Rowan fretted over her like a mother hen, much to her amusement. He insisted on doing more of the housework, would not let her lift anything heavy, and made her rest every afternoon. Delia protested that she was pregnant, not sick, but secretly she loved his attentiveness, the way he treated her like she was made of precious glass. As her belly swelled through the summer and into fall, they prepared the small room that had been Delia's when she first came to the ranch. They painted it cheerful yellow, built a cradle from smooth pine, and filled it with quilts and tiny clothes that Delia sewed. Rowan talked to her belly every night, telling their child stories about the horses, about the ranch, about the life they would have together. On a cold November night, Delia went into labor. The midwife from Placitas came, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. Rowan paced outside the door, forbidden from entering, nearly going mad with worry every time he heard Delia cry out. It was a long labor, lasting through the night and into the next day, but finally, in the pale light of dawn, a baby's cry rang out. Mrs. Henderson opened the door with a tired smile. "You have a son, Mr. Pierce, a healthy, perfect boy, and your wife did beautifully." Rowan was through the door in an instant, crossing to the bed where Delia lay exhausted but radiant, holding a bundle of blankets. She looked up at him with a smile that took his breath away. "Meet your son," she said softly, turning the blankets so he could see. Rowan looked down at the tiny, red, squalling infant and felt his heart expand in a way he did not know was possible. He had thought he knew what love was, but this was something different, something primal and overwhelming. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He is absolutely perfect." Then he looked at Delia. "You are perfect. Thank you for our son." "What should we name him?" Delia asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Rowan knew. Samuel, Samuel Rowan Pierce, after both our fathers. Samuel, Delia repeated, testing it. I like it. Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world, little one. Baby Samuel was a healthy, happy child who quickly became the center of their world. Rowan was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son. He would carry Samuel out to the barn, tucked safe in his arms, and introduce him to the horses. He would walk the floor with him at night when he was fussy, singing in that beautiful voice while Delia tried to rest. He would make silly faces to get Samuel to smile, and the first time the baby laughed, Rowan looked so proud that Delia thought her heart might burst. Delia, too, found motherhood suited her. She had worried that she might not know what to do, but instinct and love seemed to guide her. She nursed Samuel, rocked him, sang to him, and marveled at the perfect little person they had created. When he was old enough to focus his eyes, he would stare at her face with no fear, no revulsion, just infant curiosity and love. Rowan would always say, "He knows his mama is beautiful because she is." The years flowed by like water. Samuel grew from baby to toddler to little boy, running around the ranch with boundless energy, following his father everywhere, helping with the horses as much as a small child could. He had Rowan's dark hair and Delia's green eyes, and he was fearless and kind in equal measure. When Samuel was 3, Delia became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and though the pregnancy was still difficult, she handled it with more confidence. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, was born on a warm spring day, arriving quickly and easily compared to Samuel's long labor. She had Delia's strawberry blonde hair and Rowan's amber eyes, and she was a calm, content baby who seemed happy just to watch the world around her. With 2 children, the house was fuller, louder, more chaotic, but also more joyful. Rowan built an addition onto the house, giving them more room, a separate bedroom for the children. Samuel was a devoted big brother, always wanting to help with Rose, bringing her toys, telling her stories in his childish way. Delia and Rowan watched their children grow with pride and amazement, hardly able to believe that these perfect little people were theirs. When Rose was 2 and Samuel was 5, Delia found herself pregnant again. Their third child, another boy they named James, was born in the winter, a big, healthy baby with a lusty cry and an appetite that amazed them all. 3 children made the house even busier, but neither Delia nor Rowan would have changed a thing. They had the family they had dreamed of and more. The children grew up knowing they were loved. Rowan was the kind of father who was always ready with a hug, who praised their accomplishments and comforted their disappointments, who taught them about horses and hard work and treating people with respect. Delia was the steady heart of the family, keeping everything running smoothly, teaching the children to read and write, to cook and clean, to be kind and honest and brave. Samuel, as the oldest, showed early promise with horses, having inherited his father's gift. By the time he was 10, he was helping Rowan train the younger animals, patient and gentle just like his pa. Rose was quieter but no less determined, with a mind for numbers that reminded Rowan of Delia. She would sit with her mother doing the accounts, asking questions and learning. James was the most adventurous of the 3, always climbing trees or exploring or getting into some kind of mischief, but always with a smile that made it hard to stay mad at him. The ranch continued to prosper. Rowan's reputation grew, and they were able to expand, buying more land, building more corrals, taking on more horses. They hired a couple of hands to help with the work, young cowboys who were respectful and hardworking. Delia managed the growing business with skill, and their savings grew steadily. They were not rich, but they were comfortable, able to provide well for their children and put money aside for the future. Through it all, Delia and Rowan's love for each other never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with the years. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone when the children were asleep, talking by the fire like they had in those early days. Rowan still looked at Delia like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, still told her he loved her every single day. Delia still marveled at the gift she had been given. This man who had seen her worth when no one else did, who had given her a life beyond anything she had imagined. One evening, when Samuel was 12, Rose was 9, and James was 7, the family sat around the dinner table after a particularly good meal. The children were chattering about their day, and Rowan and Delia were listening with half their attention, just enjoying the sound of their children's voices, the warmth of the family they had built. "Ma," Rose said suddenly, "why do you have those marks on your face?" The table went quiet. It was not that the children did not know about the scars. They had grown up with them and never seemed to notice or care, but they had never asked directly about them before. Delia felt Rowan's hand find hers under the table, squeezing gently, offering support. "When I was very little," Delia said calmly, "there was a fire. I was hurt, and these scars are what healed. They are part of me, part of my story." "Do they hurt?" James asked, his young face concerned. "Not anymore, sweetheart. They did a long time ago, but not now." "I think they make you look interesting," Samuel said with the seriousness of a 12-year-old trying to be thoughtful. "I think they make your ma look beautiful," Rowan said firmly, "because they are part of her, and everything about her is beautiful to me." "Pa is right," Rose said decisively. "You are the prettiest ma in the whole territory." Delia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "Thank you, my loves, all of you." Later that night, after the children were in bed, Rowan held Delia close. "You handled that well. They make it easy. They just see me as ma, not as someone scarred or damaged. Because that is how I taught them to see you. That is how I see you." Rowan kissed her forehead, her scarred cheek, her lips. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever known, inside and out. I have never regretted for 1 second bringing you home that snowy night." "I have never regretted saying yes," Delia replied. "You gave me everything, Rowan. A home, a family, a life I never dreamed I could have. You saw my worth when no one else did." "I just saw the truth," Rowan said. "I just saw you." The years continued to pass. The children grew into capable young adults. Samuel became a skilled horseman, working side by side with his father, and by the time he was 18, he was handling some of the training on his own. Rose, at 15, was managing the ranch accounts entirely, freeing Delia to focus on other things. James, at 13, was talking about maybe becoming a veterinarian, fascinated by animal medicine. Rowan and Delia supported all their dreams, proud of the people their children were becoming. When Samuel was 20, he fell in love with a girl from town, a sweet-natured young woman named Clara who worked in her father's store. He brought her to the ranch for Sunday dinners, and Delia watched her son navigate courtship with all the earnest intensity of young love. It reminded her of her and Rowan, and she felt a pang of bittersweet emotion. Her baby was grown up. Samuel and Clara were married a year later, and Rowan added another room onto the house so the young couple could live with them while they saved to build their own place. A year after that, Delia became a grandmother when Clara gave birth to a little girl. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Delia felt the circle of life complete itself in a beautiful way. This tiny baby was her legacy, hers and Rowan's, proof that love could overcome anything, could build something lasting and good. Rose, too, found love, though it took longer. She was 23 when she met a young banker from Santa Fe who had come to Placitas to open a branch office. He was smart and kind and loved numbers almost as much as Rose did. and Delia knew from the moment she met him that he was perfect for her daughter. They were married in the same little church where Delia and Rowan had wed, and Delia cried through the whole ceremony, remembering her own wedding day, how far she had come since that freezing night at the station so many years ago. James went off to study veterinary medicine when he was 19, traveling to a school back east. It was hard to let him go, but Delia and Rowan were proud of his ambition. He wrote letters regularly, and when he came home for visits, he was full of stories about his studies and his plans for the future. He talked about coming back to Placitas to set up a practice, to work with the ranchers and their animals, and Delia knew he would do it. He had the determination and the heart. As Delia and Rowan entered their 50s, they began to slow down a bit, letting the younger generation take on more of the work. Samuel was running the horse training operation now, with his father's guidance but increasingly on his own. Rose and her husband had taken over the financial side of things. The ranch was thriving, grown from the small operation it had been when Delia first arrived to a well-known and respected business. One spring evening, Rowan and Delia sat on the porch they had built years earlier, watching the sun set over the land they had worked and loved for so long. Their grandchildren played in the yard, 3 of them now from Samuel and Clara, and 1 from Rose. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of the family preparing supper, talking and laughing. "We did well," Rowan said quietly, reaching over to take Delia's hand. "We did," Delia agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you ever think about that night?" Rowan asked. "The night I found you at the station. Sometimes. I think about how cold I was, how scared, how alone. And then I think about you riding up out of the snow like some kind of miracle." "You were the miracle," Rowan said. "You changed my life, Delia, made it better in every possible way." "We changed each other's lives," Delia corrected gently. She squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength that was still there even though they were both getting older. "You saw my worth when others saw nothing. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. That is a gift I can never fully repay." "You repay it every day," Rowan said. "Every time you smile at me, every time you love our children, every time you make this house a home. You repay it just by being you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Inside, someone called them for supper, but they took another moment, just the 2 of them, remembering the journey that had brought them here. Finally, Rowan stood, pulling Delia gently to her feet. "Come on, Mrs. Pierce, our family is waiting." "Yes, Mr. Pierce," Delia said with a smile. "Our family." They walked inside together, hand in hand, into the warmth and light and love of the life they had built together. It had started with a freezing night at a station, with a cowboy who chose to see worth where others saw nothing. And it had grown into something more beautiful and lasting than either of them had ever imagined. They had faced challenges and hardships, celebrated triumphs and joys, and through it all, their love had been the foundation that held everything together. As they sat down to supper surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Delia looked across the table at Rowan and saw him looking back at her with the same love and admiration he had shown from the very beginning. She smiled and he smiled back, and in that moment, everything was perfect. The years that followed were gentler, slower. Rowan and Delia stepped fully back from the day-to-day running of the ranch, content to advise when asked, but mostly just to enjoy their grandchildren and each other. They took walks in the evening, worked in the garden together, and spent long hours on the porch watching the world go by. James did return from his studies and set up a veterinary practice in Placitas, becoming an invaluable resource to all the ranchers in the area. He married a teacher, a lovely woman with a sharp mind and a kind heart, and they gave Delia and Rowan 2 more grandchildren to spoil. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. Half the territory seemed to show up, all the people whose lives had been touched by Rowan and Delia over the years. There were ranchers whose horses Rowan had trained, families who had benefited from Delia's quiet charity, young people who had worked for them over the years and remembered their kindness and fair treatment. Samuel stood up to give a toast. His own children gathered around him. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who taught us that love is not about what someone looks like or where they come from, but about who they are inside. Who built a life and a legacy based on hard work, honesty, and devotion to each other. Who showed us every day what it means to be a good person. Ma, Pa, we love you and we are grateful for everything you have given us." Everyone raised their glasses, and Delia and Rowan stood together, overwhelmed by the love in the room. Rowan wrapped his arm around Delia's waist, pulling her close. "30 years," he murmured in her ear. "Best 30 years of my life." "Mine too," Delia whispered back. "Every single day." As the party went on around them, they danced together, moving slowly to the music, lost in each other. Delia rested her head on Rowan's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, the same heart that had opened to her on a freezing night so long ago. She thought about the girl she had been, standing alone at that station, thinking she had nothing and no one. She thought about how wrong she had been, how the universe had simply been waiting for the right moment to bring her to exactly where she was supposed to be. "I love you," she said, the words she had said 1,000 times and would say 1,000 more. "I love you too," Rowan replied, the words he never tired of saying. "Now and always, Delia, now and always." They danced until the music stopped, and then they danced a little longer just because they could, just because they had each other. And when the party finally ended and everyone had gone home, they walked through their house, now quiet again, and retired to their bedroom, the same room they had shared for 30 years. As they lay together in the darkness, Rowan's arms around her and her head on his chest, Delia felt a profound sense of peace. She had been given a gift that cold December night, a gift of love and family and belonging. She had been seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life, and that had made all the difference. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Rowan asked sleepily. "For choosing me. For seeing my worth when others saw nothing. For giving me this life." Rowan's arms tightened around her. "You had worth all along, sweetheart. I just had the good sense to recognize it, and you gave me just as much as I gave you. You gave me love, a family, a reason to work hard and build something lasting. You gave me everything that matters." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, and dreamed of all the years still to come. Because even after 30 years, they knew their story was not over. There were more grandchildren to meet, more sunsets to watch, more moments to share. Their love had been tested and proven strong, and it would carry them through whatever the future held. Years later, when they were old and gray and their children and grandchildren had built their own lives and legacies, Rowan and Delia would still sit on that porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sun set over the land they loved. And sometimes one of their great-grandchildren would climb up into Delia's lap and ask about the scars on her face, and she would tell the story of the fire, but also the story of the cowboy who had seen past those scars to the woman beneath. "Your great-grandfather saved me," she would say, smiling at Rowan. "He saw my worth when others saw nothing, and he gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. He taught me that love is not about being perfect. It is about being seen and valued for who you truly are." And the children would listen wide-eyed, and then they would run off to play, and Rowan would lean over and kiss Delia's scarred cheek and tell her she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Because to him, she always would be. The scars were just part of her story, and he loved every part of her story because it had led her to him. They lived long lives, Rowan and Delia Pierce, surrounded by love and family. They saw their grandchildren grow and have children of their own. They saw the ranch they had built continue to thrive under new generations. They saw the little town of Placitas grow and change, though they remained constant. The elderly couple in the small ranch house who had been there longer than almost anyone could remember. When Rowan passed away at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep with Delia's hand in his, she mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had had nearly 45 years together, years full of love and laughter and the kind of deep partnership that most people only dream of. She missed him terribly, but she carried him in her heart, in the family they had built, in the legacy of love they had created. Delia lived another 5 years, long enough to see her first great-great-grandchild born, a beautiful baby girl with amber eyes like her great-great-grandfather. She held that baby and told her about Rowan, about the cowboy who had chosen her on a freezing night, about the love that had built an entire family. And then, on a warm spring evening much like the one when Rowan had proposed all those years ago, Delia closed her eyes and went to join him, ready to dance with him again in whatever came next. At her funeral, Samuel stood before the gathered family, now numbering in the dozens, and told the story one more time. The story of how his mother, scarred and alone and freezing at a train station, had been seen and chosen by his father. How that single act of kindness and recognition had blossomed into a love that had lasted a lifetime. How their love had created a family that would continue for generations, all because one cowboy had looked at a woman and seen her true worth when everyone else had seen nothing. That is their legacy, Samuel said, looking out at all the faces, his siblings and children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them here because of Rowan and Delia. Not just the ranch or the business, but the lesson they taught us. That everyone has worth. Everyone deserves to be seen and valued for who they truly are. That love is the most powerful force in the world, strong enough to build something that lasts forever. The family buried Delia next to Rowan on that small rise where he had proposed, the place with the beautiful view that had always been their favorite spot. They placed a single headstone for both of them, with their names and dates and a simple inscription. They saw the worth in each other and built a legacy of love. And in the years that followed, the story of Rowan and Delia Pierce became part of family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The story of how love found them both on a freezing December night, how a cowboy had looked at a scarred woman and seen her true beauty, how that love had grown and flourished and created something lasting and good. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations, and visitors to the property would sometimes see the headstone on the rise and ask about it. The family would always smile and tell the story, keeping alive the memory of the cowboy and the woman who had built it all, whose love had been the foundation for everything that came after. Because in the end, that is what matters most. Not wealth or fame or even comfort, but love. The kind of love that sees past surface to soul, that values a person for who they truly are, that builds something lasting and beautiful. The kind of love that can start with a simple act of kindness on a freezing night and grow into a legacy that touches generations. That was the gift Rowan gave Delia that December evening so long ago when he saw her freezing at the station and chose her. Chose to see her worth when others saw nothing. And it was the gift they gave each other every day of their long lives together, The gift of being truly seen, truly valued, truly loved. And that gift, that legacy of love, lived on long after they were gone. Proof that one moment of kindness, one act of seeing someone's true worth, can change not just one life but many lives, rippling out through time like waves on water, touching shores that the original throwers of the stone will never see, but that are forever changed by that first, brave splash.